So when it comes to our health, indoor air quality plays a big role. Many programs like weatherization, the homes IRA rebate programs rolling out across many states, building codes, and even especially the green building certifications always require some kind of prescriptive strategies to ensure air quality is sufficient and healthier in our homes. But how do we know these things are working? How do we know they are being effective, and how do we ensure these systems are maintained over time, working over time, and actually maintaining that air quality? This is where we enter the sort of cheap indoor air quality monitoring systems and devices that have flooded the market, especially since COVID, where in the past, before that, when you wanted to know, you really needed these industrial hygienicists or advanced commercial monitors or these sort of home inspectors coming in to do in time, place evaluations. But now every individual can take control of their own health and air quality through these personalized monitorings. So join me today with our speaker as I discuss how we've been dabbling with these air quality monitors over several years and looking at what's working, what's not working, and really ultimately how to connect all the dots to automate our homes for air quality and improved health. Now, before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to our longest running ever sponsor, Panasonic. Panasonic has partnered with Swidget to offer demand controlled ventilation sensors, which can be strategically placed throughout homes as plugs or fan switches to detect poor air quality or moisture, and can be used in junction with Panasonic's supply ventilation, exhaust only strategies like their Whisper Green Energy Star bath fans, or even their advanced energy recovery ventilator systems, aka their IntelliBalance, which they have systems that work down at super high flow rates and even in cold climates. You can turn your ventilation systems into smart ventilation systems. So learn more at iaq.na.panasonic.com/smart controls. All right, so welcome everyone to Home Indoor Air Quality Monitoring and Do-It-Yourself Automation. This course is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier, and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. This course is approved for multiple continuing education units, including two of the pillars, health and energy, in our certified green home professional designation. AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Check out the 5-digit FIAS code for Passive House that will be sent to you in your certificates at the end if you're here the entire CEU hour, as well as the 5-digit ICC code that will be sent to you. And a huge thanks to Energy Smart Institute, who's sponsoring our ICC CEUs. Check them out for all of your Raider training needs. So with that, I am super excited to welcome back our speaker here, Scott Farbman. Scott, I think you were on last time talking about a very different topic in regarding building decarbonization or embodied carbon. And so very different, but always great to have you back and discuss this new topic with you. So Scott, welcome, and please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Happy and glad to be back. Completely different topic, but two areas that I'm incredibly, passionate and interested in. Gonna take a second to share my screen here. So I want to just shout out to Brett and Green Homes because they made my continuing education process a lot easier. I'm a still licensed architect, not officially practicing, but like to maintain my license and status. And it was a big help having all your awesome content to learn from and keep my credentials up. So super grateful for that. I'm calling this component of my presentation simply we need to breathe and eat. Two basic things that I think a lot of us take for granted a lot of the time. And I want to kind of share my experience getting into the indoor air quality realm. And a lot of it started because of what Brett mentioned. And it relates back to this kind of statistic specifically that we as humans spend about 90% of our time indoors. And when COVID started in, early mid 2020, a lot of us transitioned to at-home work, and none of us really understood, our indoor environmental situation and where we lived and ate and slept and watched TV and did whatever you were doing. But we basically transitioned to spending 90% of our time, not just indoors, but like in our own home, a lot of which don't have adequate ventilation systems and old, quite old mechanical and building envelope components. So, um, if you ever kind of just want to look at the headlines, this slide's a little dated, but when I did the research for this slide, you could just see how many headlines come up around air quality from, reputable sources, whether they're research-backed publications or World Health Organization, stuff like that. Um, Air quality is a very popular topic nowadays, and it's not going to go away, and it's something we can't just continue to brush off or take for granted. My initial at-home experiment started in 2020 when I, realized we were spending a lot of time in our apartment and we didn't quite know what the level of performance was. And I opted to pick up this indoor air quality monitor the first time going around and starting to take a look at what was happening during daily typical procedures. So, if you're not aware of this particular monitor, no pun intended, it's actually called an aware element. It tracked temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, chemicals in the form of total VOCs, and particulate matter at the 2.5 micron level. So I was just curious, like, what was happening when we did stuff during the day? And for PM 2.5, uh, it usually got triggered while we were cooking. We had some ventilation in the kitchen, maybe not the best. It didn't matter what we're cooking, if you're kind of cooking on high heat, stovetop type stuff, and you're burning food material or cooking food material rather, because I don't burn stuff. I'm a good cook. Uh, it's going to produce particulates kind of any way you slice it. Generally, CO2 here, the level's not that bad at, 750-ish peak, but you start to take a look at how things change throughout the day or how the CO2 levels are impacted by the number of people, animals, etc. in the space you're spending time in. And then finally, this is a bit of a weird one, but my spouse Carolyn, she got me a really nifty coffee maker. I really love coffee, and this was it's called a siphon, so it uses alcohol-based combustion to heat up a tube, and the vacuum occurs, but nonetheless, we're burning stuff indoors, and the VOC monitors didn't like that one. So really interesting insights, and from there, I started to think about, well, what are we supposed to do with this information? We have the information, great, but uh, what is within reason to improve things and what is maybe needed to make things better beyond just like human behavior, opening a window, etc. So kind of an obvious one, but it does get ignored quite frequently is if you have exhaust available where you're trying to manage source control or where you have source control that you're able to implement, use those things, use your range hood, even if it's loud, use your bathroom exhaust fans, do whatever you have to do to help exchange the air and the spaces that might have pollutants in them. Open windows when you can, it can help, with that air exchange. And then it might not be a bad idea from time to time when the outdoor air quality is good too, to also open up your windows, run your fans, kind of flush the space through it. The terminology escapes me, but there's a German phrase for this where you kind of do it every morning. It's like part of your daily life, and that's something that has always really interested me. And if we're not able to get there with kind of easy solutions, we might need to start investigating active or more costly alternatives, which could be a range hood that works a little bit better. In our instance, we had a above range microwave that did vent out, but wasn't super effective. A, because it's a microwave, and B, because you could see they typically don't reach out to the front burner in plan, which impacts its capture efficacy. Um, or and then in addition to that, if you are having trouble managing carbon dioxide levels, if they reach above a threshold that you as an individual aren't comfortable with, which could be 800 ppm, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,500, you as an individual need to make that decision, but you might need to investigate mechanical ventilation, which is generally recommended for almost any home anywhere. The most popular option being an ERV or an energy recovery ventilator, which helps you retain some of that heat and moisture you might be exhausting out in part of that process. And then this is a good one, but it's hard for me too because I came up in the energy efficiency industry and practice, but air quality, or I'm sorry, energy is going to have to take a back seat for air quality sometimes. It takes energy to make our indoor environments more healthy, and I think that's something that we need to uh, need to accept as both practitioners and humans, living in a world that have costs and implications associated to that. So I've got a few more slides and then I'm going to kick it to Brett, but needless to say, I didn't just stop there, right? I do have a bit of a obsessive and addictive personality, and I like data and I like to be informed by said data. So my fleet of monitors evolved and expanded. I've got several more indoor air quality monitors. You can see them on the screen here on the top row, of varying kind of level and preference and cost and application too. One being a commercial and the other three being residential applications, consumer applications. And then kind of broke out beyond that a little bit. So the bottom left is an outdoor monitor that I have set up in our backyard, and I've found it's interesting to compare our local backyard results against the EPA kind of regional results for our city. There could be pretty dramatic differences there due to local factors, whether your neighbor's grilling a bunch of steak or your other neighbor has a bonfire going, or it could be other things too. It's a continual investigation as to the comparison of local versus regional uh, performance data there. And then just more simple sensors. You might have seen these Govee and Akara, and there's a handful of other brands, but kind of just temperature and humidity where you can kind of deploy throughout your home or building in areas that you might be interested, not just, the room itself like a bedroom, but you can put them near windows to better monitor the temperature and humidity at the windows to potentially control or prevent condensation happening or get a better insight into that. Um, and then on the HVAC side of things, things expanded as well and have evolved where we've are looking into smart controls for our furnace and air conditioners, and then this could be for your heat pump too, or whatever HVAC system you have. Also, as Brett mentioned, the Panasonic IntelliBalance ERV is where we landed for our fresh air mechanical system. And then this is funny, but like anything in this world that we work with and live in, typically if you solve one problem, you generally either create a new one or reveal a new one that needs to be addressed in the process. And having to do a bit more proper dehumidification came up in our home. So we leveraged our relationships with the awesome people at Santa Fe to do one of those dehumidifiers. So that's where I'm going to pause and pass it to Brett to jump in and share his initial experiences. And then we'll talk about how some of this can all come together too in the end.
Yeah, and Scott, you were mentioning, showing a range, cooking range, and talking about exhausting cooking. Can you, I guess, speak to a little bit about, whether you've been using electric or gas or what some of those differences might be.
Yeah. So we made a consolidated effort to try and minimize the amount of gas cooking that we do in our home. We've kind of always been, the past couple of years, we've been looking for a new place to move to, so we didn't want to make any permanent changes. So we've been leveraging a plug-in induction cooktop with the two zone cooktop, and also leveraging our electric toaster oven too. So I'd say I think about the last year, I've completely migrated to electric based cooking. And that's important for a number of reasons. You're not having open combustion in your home anymore, and you're not being exposed to some of the particulates and pollutants that come from gas cooking. But I do want to preface it by saying, the switch from gas to electric doesn't mean you're like good to go as is. As I uh, realized in one of the earlier graphs, just cooking food material will release particulates and VOCs that may or may not be harmful, but you do want to still rely on adequate exhaust and ventilation, and keeping an eye on things. Like if you do start to burn stuff, it's gonna throw the PM sensor, and you're not completely protected from these things if you're simply have electrified your cooking source.
Great. Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I wanted to, we're kind of sharing our lived experience and what we've went through to hopefully help it, make sense for you all and the people you're working with to see, how they can improve their homes, which is, what we're all about and being healthier. So I wanted to quickly go through a couple of things. And, I've been experimenting with indoor air quality monitoring, really going all the way back to 2019. Since then, I've had 9 different monitors across my house with 2 sets of the 2 same models and 4 different brands. So not as many brands, I think, as you've used, Scott, but certainly a lot of monitors. Um, and what I can just tell you in summary is that I can't really say, people ask, are these things accurate? And I can't tell you that they're accurate or not because I would have to run, I think, some kind of formal industrial scientific test at the same time and see, whether those came out, which are more accurate than these. But what I can say is that they're responding to situations that are occurring that I have enough knowledge about as to whether, it's reacting to that situation in a way to give me the information I need. And that they also seem to be responding together. So like one different brand or device will respond to that situation, that air quality situation, as the other one will too, and they'll both tell me, hey, there's an issue going on here. So that's been my general experience with these things. The first device I got was back in 2019 because I had concerns about my basement humidity issues. And it's a cheap little blue dot called the Tempo 2, and I never got a photo of it. So here's just a little blue dot. This is literally what it looked like. You hold it up, little blue dot, and it tracked humidity, temperature, and it's one of the few devices and I'm still surprised to this day how few devices actually track dew point and report that out. You can get the dew point by evaluating the temperature and the humidity, and you can run the data yourself, but it's just surprising how few of these devices, in my experience, have tracked actual dew point to report to you easily. Um, Unfortunately, this little thing gave me great data on a phone app. I loved it, very helpful, very informative to show that I needed to take some dehumidification action in my basement. But because it was so tiny, it got lost somewhere and stopped reporting. So it's long gone, and I don't have that data anymore, other than what I, tracked previously. So, make sure you get monitors that aren't tiny and can't get lost. My next set of devices I got were 2 Fubots early in 2020. Those were kind of the trendy ones back then, I think, that kind of came out, and everyone who was talking about this was talking about these devices. What was exciting about them is they could track, not only temperature and humidity and dew point, but also particulate matter, PM 2.5, and volatile organic compounds, both causing unhealthy air in homes, leading to health issues. These devices would flash colors at you when there was an issue. So you would just see this like orange flash, or it would flash if you a kid jumped and pounded the ground, it would make it flash too and scare it. So, but it would also flash when there were colors, but it wouldn't, that really didn't tell you what the issue was. It was just flashing at you. But it would also send you these weekly reports and it would tell you, hey, there's this issue here. You should check out your humidity. Um, Unfortunately, as of this year, they stopped supporting the app service, but you can still track the data on an online database, log in and see over time, what's going on in your house and still get those reports. But one really cool thing about this is when I updated my range hood 5 years ago, this Foobot was able to communicate with my range hood, and so I set my Foobot above my stove, and every time I had elevated PM 2.5 from cooking, it would communicate with my hood range, and it would both turn the hood range on when there were elevated PM 2.5 emissions, and it would turn my range had 4 different CFM settings, and it would turn it up to the higher levels depending on the thresholds I had set in there if those PM 2.5 levels went up. And then also it would turn it off eventually once it detected less, than the thresholds of PM 2.5. So it was fun because it would also just randomly kick on all the time, such as somebody blowing a candle out or people burning wood outside of having a fire, or even when those wildfire smokes would come through once in a while, very far away from where I live, but the smoke would pour into our house and it would turn my range hood on and it would signal to me, hey, you've got a PM 2.5 problem, and I could take other actions to resolve that. Sadly, this service was canceled. And so now I still have all this, and I've lost the connection, and that just goes to show our reliance on technology service providers. If they go out of business or cancel it, you can lose that ability. But I truly am a believer. I believe there are other devices that do this, and I know it works. So I think I'm excited to see what other manufacturers are doing it. Um, then in 2020 later on, because of one of the downsides of my Foobot, it tried to did something called a CO2 equivalency, or CO2e. And a lot of devices do this, unfortunately. They try to guess what the CO2 is in the air by basing it off the volatile organic compounds. And, I've come to find out that data is wildly inaccurate. So I wanted to have actual CO2 data in my house before I implemented a ventilation project. In addition, I did a radon test, one of the cheap tests I got, and that came back kind of high, and I was kind of nervous about my radon in my house. So I picked up an AirThings monitor and put that up, and from there, I was able to quickly determine that yes, I have concerning levels of CO2 in my home and concerning levels of radon that I should address. And in fact, when it comes to radon, my active radon system had just been installed in late 2020, 5 years ago, and there was a major 3-day power outage that occurred. And what it did was it had tripped the breaker, and it knocked out the radon system. And because I was, not only because I had a radon, or because I had a radon monitor, but because I was also actively looking at it, right? And noticing it, those are two different things. Having it and actually looking at it, very much two different things. But I saw that it had a spike here. So, this is when I, noticed all the radon issues I had without ventilation, went down with the system, but then there was a spike and I'm like, what's going on? All my systems should be up and running. I go down into the basement and I see the fluid levels here were even, and that's a sign that the system is not pressurized and it's not working. But what normal person is going down into their dark, moldy utility room, or their damp utility room, hopefully not moldy, and looking at this thing? Nobody's doing that. And so, because I had that air quality system monitor, I was able to go, oh, I should investigate this problem, flip the breaker back on, notice that, and then, up and away we went. Um, you might have picked up on the fact that all of these air quality systems to um, rely on you to do something, right? They rely on you to, pull your app on and actually look at your app and take the time to do that. or they rely on you to log into an online database, or they rely on you to maybe get a weekly report, and we're all buried in emails, right? And so I will, I think most, normal people who aren't doing this for their day job are not going to look at this stuff, right? It's going to go unnoticed forever. And so I wanted to get something that could, visually show me what the heck was going on. And so Scott, you alluded to this earlier on, but these aware devices, give you this visual representation of what's happening in your house in mostly real time in 5-minute increments. And so in 2021, I added this to my arsenal of monitoring systems. And this looks at temperature, humidity, starting from the left to right, humidity, CO2, chemicals or otherwise TVOCs, and then particulate matter, PM 2.5. And it also shows what I like, this sort of holistic air quality score. And it looks at all the data and says, here's your overall home air quality score, which I think is kind of cool. Um, and so what I'll know, often is I might, be walking around my house and I'm like, oh, I feel a little cold, I feel a little hot. And sure enough, that dot over here on the temperature will be up one saying, hey, it's a little cold, it's a little hot. And so I'm not crazy, right? And otherwise I might say I feel a little humid or a little dry. I look and the dot will be elevated here on the left side, the second to the right, second to the left. Or I might say, hey, I smell something kind of burning in the oven or whatever it might be, and I'll see this elevated PM 2.5. And you can kind of get that visual right there in real time. And it does these sweeps every 5 minutes. And then you can pull open your phone app and go, oh, here's what's going on, and here's what's been going on over the last week. You get that data. Later in 2021, I picked up an AirThings Mini, which has a mold risk indicator on it, which I think is pretty scary, but pretty neat. And so to be sure, there was a question in the chat, do these systems, detect mold? And, Scott, I wanted to get your thoughts on that too in general in a second. But, this does not detect mold, but what it does do is detects humidity plus temperature plus time, which is what is the ingredients you can get for mold. And so, I was able to use this system to know I better get a whole home dehumidifier in my utility room, because I'm having these, elevated mold risks from the humidity and temperature data that this AirThings Mini is giving me. And it also gives, VOCs a risk as well, but doesn't give all the other things that AirThings does. Um, and then my last brand to sort of add to this, and actually this goes to somebody, Scott, you said what was that German word for airing the house out in the morning? And I think it's I looked it up. I just Googled it when you mentioned it. And this actually is that German word. It's half of the German word. It's I think it's pronounced like something like um Luftian or Luftin. I could be saying it all wrong, but that's the word. It's like Luftin, Luftin. And so this is the Luft, and that's what this device is called. It's a brand from Sunradon, and I kind of joke that it's sort of the anti-air, the anti air, those little plug thing people put in, those scent fresheners that they plug into their house, right? And those things are really poisoning you, sadly to tell you. And so this is sort of the anti-run. You plug it in and it's not freshening your air, it's just telling you how bad your air is. So I think it's a cool little device for basements because it really focuses on radon, which is where you first want to detect your basement air quality issues. And then also it gives you this mold risk indicator. Again, it's not detecting mold. It's just detecting the recipe, temperature plus humidity. And again, this I just took this snapshot this morning when I was putting this together, and it's telling me that this is my equivalent CO2 in my bedroom, which is just insane because I've never seen CO2 levels this high ever since I've added ventilation. So you can just see how off these systems are. And I don't mean to pick on this one. They're all just ridiculous. They should not be putting these in there. So, um, um, but this device, also detects air quality, also over time. And then last, I added the Aware Omni. to my house. And so again, just similar to the Aware, but it's more of a commercial system. So a commercial office manager can log in and track multiple systems across commercial office spaces to see how they're doing. The normal Aware element doesn't let you log into a database to do this, but the Aware Omni does. And one unique thing about this is they've also added light and noise to this. So you can't look at that on the app. You have to log in and look at it. And this is, I think, important because when we talk about health and air quality, we light and sound are also a component of our health, and we have to have good light and good sound to be healthy, and it often gets left out of the conversation. So I'm really excited about what they're doing, but I'm not excited about what I'm seeing when I look at this thing. On the light one, it's just telling me how dark my house is. And I think that's just because I have this thing shoved in a corner on a southern wall and the windows are not getting the light to it. So I think it's just not seeing that light. So it's telling me information that I don't believe is true because my house is pretty well lit. So I just think it's because of where I've placed it. The noise one is also concerning. It's telling me that I'm having about a 52 decibels on average, even in the middle of the night, which is not true at all. I have anyone can download the NIOSH app on their phone and detect their sound in real time. And I'll run this thing and it's showing me around 35 in the middle of the night. And so it's just way off. And so I appreciate what they're doing. I think the actual device itself, if you put your ear to it, it's actually making a little noise. It's like, So I think it's actually picking up its own noise. And, I don't know. I have to reach out to them and see what's going on. So if you get one of these, just, minus it by 15, I think, and you'll be about where you probably want to be on sound. So, overall, I'm going to hand it back to Scott here is, what I want to say is that I have all of these monitors. They're flung everywhere. There's data all over the place. And even I do this for a living and I don't know how to make sense of it all. And I don't think the normal person is. And so why I'm really excited to have Scott come and talk too is, how he's been able to integrate these kinds of air quality monitors in these systems and try to make sense of what we're seeing to start to automate our ventilation. So Scott, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I'll reiterate your position on the mold detection. As far as I know, there's nothing that could actually do that quite yet. I've seen some whispers of innovative products, but I think the best we have to date is the recipe, right? Looking at the relative humidity, the moisture content, and the temperature and the spaces that are being monitored.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Let's go back to my presentation. And this will be fun. So to build on Brett's kind of question, like how do we pull it all together? And there is a way. Is it easy? Not really. I have the pleasure, and I want to give a shout out to my friend and colleague Mike Giblin. He's a controls engineer and designer at the company I used to work at before I changed career paths a little bit. And he does controls every day. That's his job. And he found this open source platform called Home Assistant. And it is something that consumers and homeowners could use to set up a home automation, home management platform for their home. And it's as close to infinite impossibilities as a platform can be. And if you're curious for a little bit more detail, I'm just going to touch on it a little bit here, but I wrote an article on LinkedIn about it, and I can put the link in the chat when I'm done presenting. But I go through how I came upon this and how I've started to use it and build it out in my home. And some of these images and what I'm talking about are from that article. So the first thing is like Brett, I had 6, 7, 8 different kind of monitors from different manufacturers, and I was getting sick of opening them in their individual native app or web app. And I said, this is nonsense. There's got to be a better way to do this. So I talked to Mike, the controls guy, and he's like, Home Assistant, this is what you do. There's likely integrations made for you to pull this all together into a singular place. And that's what I ended up doing. So you could see on the screen here that I've got carbon dioxide readings from a variety of different sensors in my home from different manufacturers, and I could see them all next to each other, which is amazing. Even just this simple thing kind of like revolutionized the way that I go about being able to quickly look at what's happening in our home and not have to spend time jumping between different applications, which again is just the best. And you could do it for any of the parameters that those devices pick up, so PM, VOCs, etc. As long as it's integratable into the platform, which pretty much everything I've come across is, if it has an open API. And I'm not a big computer science person, but I was able to kind of cobble this all together myself by leveraging YouTube videos and write-ups and how-tos. So it's definitely doable if you have some minimal computer chops. The other cool thing about this is I was able to integrate our HVAC controls. So on the left here is our Ecobee thermostat where I can physically control it in Home Assistant now. So I don't need to go into the Ecobee app. I could do it all in Home Assistant. And you could also start to pull together and trend data, and you could see that visually. I'm a visual person. So I like to see, when is the HVAC running? Why is it running? And how long is it running for? And now I have that again, all in one nice cohesive place. Um, and if you've have devices that are smart enabled, you can create, on off buttons for them. If you don't have devices that are smart enabled, so Brett mentioned the Panasonic has the name of the product escapes me, but it makes it smart enabled based on an air quality sensor on a wall panel. You could also do that yourself. There's these little Wi-Fi relays that you can connect to the on-off power source on the Panasonic ERV, on the Santa Fe dehumidifier, pretty much any piece of equipment, and then you can smart enable it. And that's what I chose to do for everything. So I've got on-off controls for our ERVs. I've got on-off controls for those ERVs to go into boost mode, and I have on-off controls for the dehumidifier. Could also do the same thing for your lights. So as you can see, I'm starting to cobble together this really cool dashboard that it pretty much can give me information and control a lot of the stuff in our house. This is where we start to get into some more of the like advanced thinking, and this is a more kind of deconstructed version of what Brett said his range hood and Foobot was doing, right? So if the Foobot detected a rise in particulate matter PM 2.5, it told the range hood to turn on. You can you could create those same control sequences from scratch within Home Assistant if you have those individual items integrated into your platform. So the example here on the right is a very similar protocol, right? But kind of different concepts of equipment. So I wrote a control sequence condition that said if our bedroom CO2 levels reach 800 ppm and boost mode isn't on for our ERV, then turn boost mode on, let it run for an hour, get that like additional boosted airflow, and then turn off boost mode and go back to whatever operation it was in prior to that. This can be done for any of the parameters on any sensor anywhere in your home. Could do it with the range hood. I could do this based on, I also have conditions based on PM 2.5. So if there's a, high level of PM 2.5 detected in our home, boost modes will activate and help flush the space a little bit faster. The other cool one here, not related to air quality, but living in ComEd territory, we have access to something called real-time or hourly pricing, where I'm getting live data from ComEd about the price per kilowatt. And you could write these load shifting control sequences that says, I want you to heat or cool something at a certain time if the price of energy is above or below a certain threshold. So you could do that too. And if you start to think about this, again, the possibilities are almost infinite. You can package and bundle and control and set conditional statements and do everything you want to do in this open source platform. And a lot of this is click, drop down, select type stuff. It's meant to be user friendly. There's a good user interface. There's also more of a command prompt portion of it too. So if you are code savvy, you could do all of this in command prompt scripting as well. So what does the dashboard kind of look like for me right now? This is a screenshot from this morning where I've taken those CO2 levels in numeric uh, visual standing, but I've plotted them out in charts now. So I could see the differences across the different sensors in the home and also see the time period as well. And I can start to see what happens and maybe like investigate issues like Brett did with his Ryzen and Radon, right? Do the same for PM 2.5 and VOCs, temperatures, humidities, dew points. I had to build dew point in this platform, so I had to kind of script the calculation. But again, anything is possible. You could do math in Home Assistant. Also like to see kind of the visual schedule representations of when our equipment is running and our Ecobee and outdoor information, as well as the regional EPA airnow.gov information too. So this is like what I'm all about. I love this platform. I recommend it all the time. It's not for everyone because it does require a bit of finagling and time spent reading and understanding, and stuff breaks over time. Not like physically breaks, but the digital integration could break and you need to troubleshoot and reload or update. And it's subject to everything Brett said about online services and all that good stuff. But again, super powerful tool. It's one of the best options, I think, to kind of pull things all together in a singular place. And there are kind of alternative pre-baked air quality HVAC control options too. Haven IAQ is one of them that gets a lot of discussion on, the HVAC and high performance building community on LinkedIn. So if you're not kind of interested in building this yourself, there are some kind of pre-made options that could achieve a lot of the similar results. Just, it's less flexible and you're reliant on them for their ability to update and manage things. So would love to get into additional discussion, maybe start answering some of the Q&A. And yeah, let's do it. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah, Scott. So, a specific question, could you, I don't know if you mentioned it or not, and I didn't catch it, but was your Home Assist green or yellow?
Yeah, good question. I see that in the chat now. So I built a Home Assistant operating system kind of from scratch. So I bought a mini PC. It's a small like Dell Intel computer or a small Intel computer. And
Hmm.
I loaded the operating system on that computer, so it's dedicated specifically to Home Assistant. The green and the yellow are kind of pre-made options that you could buy online. It's like preloaded, ready to go. That might be an easier lead in for a lot of people. I kind of like building computers and doing that stuff, so it was more of just a kind of hobby personal choice to do that.
Yeah, and I think that, makes me think like what, like let's say you're a home performance contractor or an HVAC, I'm learning about more HVAC contractors that are getting into this, or even builders who, we know some builders, some architect members who are doing air quality sensor leave behinds and all that, which is great. But could there be a point where they're like, hey, we just build this sort of custom thing and then we sort of, replicate our strategy in every home, even if it's a different strategy, but they could, I mean, is it possible that they can just copy the program and move it over to the next homeowners so it's kind of built out? Does that make
Yeah,
sense what I'm asking?
it does. I think people have been trying to figure out how to monetize this platform for a
Yeah.
long time, and there's definitely an ability to do that, but things do break
Yeah.
um, and unlink, and you do have to dedicate time to manage. So I could see it being tricky to kind of launch this on a more like a larger scale, but it's certainly possible. And I know people that are looking into it. And
Yeah.
I just want to again shout out Tim DeStacio on LinkedIn
Yeah.
has kind of like created this DIY package of HVAC temperature sensors, controls, and stuff that he can send out to any of his customers. It's easy for them to install, and then he can monitor things remotely and investigate and make
Yeah.
informed decisions from there. And I think that's like the future of HVAC and all this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm hoping we can have a discussion with Tim next year sometime.
Yeah, get him
And
on the show for sure.
yeah, and keep
He's
this
awesome.
conversation going. So well, and that's what I was wondering. I'm just because I think the intention is that there's a an entity who can also monitor this somewhere else. So is this a system where somebody could theoretically also monitor multiple systems if they had it deployed in homes or multifamily units,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think the other question that I saw kind of came in is, okay, instead of doing this sort of these scattered shot systems everywhere, what are you seeing out there where there's, maybe one solution? And so I'll kind of answer first. I think there's two ways to answer is that, first just monitoring, right? Like, is there just like one solution? And then second, is there also monitoring plus automation? And I don't know really the answer to that second part, but on the first part, I kind of, from my perspective, I get excited both about um, aware and air things and imagine, you know, it would be a good idea just to have multiple sensors placed around, strategically around every home, right? Just like we have carbon monoxide and hopefully carbon monoxide, right? And smoke sensors all around our homes. We should have these air quality sensors strategically placed. And so maybe you'd say, hey, if I just do one brand, then I can get it all on one app, right? And I can get it all on one. I mean, it's very nice. I can log in on my Air things and I can see my monitors. And if you had multiple monitors in each room, you could see them all. Um, and so, and I would just say, I like Air things for the data that it gives me, but I don't like it for the sort of like real-time communication, right? I have to go up and wave my hand in front of it and it will blink a red, green, or yellow color at me. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Half the time it's just air pressure, right? It's just angry that a storm is coming and the pressure has went up or down. So
Yeah.
I think you can remove that, but it's not telling you what's going on. And so on the flip side, I also recommend the Omnis, those can be actually mounted on the walls and strategically placed around homes so you can physically walk into a room and see a number and see those, like I showed you all those dots. And your whole family can be educated on what those dots mean. Hey, something's going on in this room, the humidity is high or whatever. The only problem again with the Omni, I guess the Omni is nice because you can log in and also see that central database. But those are expensive units, they're commercial units. So that's just been my experience. But I guess Scott, I don't know what your thoughts are if you think about one brand that's working and then, also if you've seen any with automation. So
Yeah, I think it's like it's tough to stay all in one ecosystem, right? It's just hard. And then plus what happens if they go the way of Fubot and stop
right.
providing services, you're kind of in a tough bind, right? Um, I think we're more likely to be in this open source world more than anything where
Yeah.
you're gonna have to be juggling multiple ecosystems, but if you want to, there are ways to pull it together, Home Assistant. And then I mentioned Haven is a product and a company that's doing some really cool stuff, and they're trying to have this kind of all-in-one HVAC control and monitor package that people seem to really like. I haven't gotten my hands on it just yet, but that's the only one that comes to mind that I've seen in like a residential home setting that kind of can do a lot of this stuff that we're talking about it under one hood.
Yeah. Well, real quick, we before just as a reminder that we are recording this session, so it is going to be posted up on our YouTube channel, so you can check back there in the next week, and it will be available. Or you can go there right now, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and get an instant update. For those of you watching this in the future on demand, take your quiz with an 80% passing rate. For those of you here live today, and you've been here for this full CU hour. Check for your certificates in maybe in your spam from certs at gutenbergcerts.com. And please take the survey that pops up and you can drop your AIA number in there for your AIA CEUs. And as always, before we get into some more of these questions, a huge thanks to our board of directors, our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reyna, and all of our members, nearly 500, which we're trying to reach by the end of the year for our 25th year anniversary. So I hope you'll support us. And then all of our sponsors who like Panasonic and Tamarack and Build Equinox, among them for smart on-demand controlled ventilation and better ventilation systems, and Rheem and Timber HP. Thanks to them for supporting our work. There was a question that came in, Scott, a little bit earlier, and it was just about the deterioration of sponsors, it's not sponsors of
Sensors.
the sensors. And I know with PM 2.5, I've noticed been a bit tricky when dust starts to clog up. This happened to me on two different monitors. Dust would kind of get in there and clog it up. And I think one of them I may have cleaned it incorrectly. So now it just permanently reports 40 whatever grams or whatever they're called of PM 2.5. Very bad. And I'm like, no, this thing is lying to me. So I know that only when it elevates above 40 is it a problem. The other one I have, I think, is reporting 70. Again, it got all dusty. My kids shook one of them violently, and that's when it started going downhill. So what are you seeing with like sensor deterioration?
Yeah, I do know it's a thing, and the reason that I know it's a thing specifically is because one of the monitors I have shows sensor health, and it tells you
Oh,
when it's meant to be replaced. And
hmm.
that's from the Kytera, and it's more of a commercial product, and
Yeah.
or uh, maybe the results are need to be more reliable. So that's actually something I haven't looked into on more of the residential consumer products like the Aware, the Air Things, or these other ones. What is the guidance on longevity and when may you need to do something about it? Like sensor drift is something that comes up frequently where it can, for VOCs specifically, where things can just start to kind of linearly escalate over time, and there's really not much you could do about it except replace the sensors.
Right, yeah, or you just have to know, hey, I know it's, like I said, I know mine is sitting at 40 now, which 40 is probably like code for two, right? In the PM 2.5. But again, that's not ideal because that sort of defeats the purpose if you're, selling your home or, trying to explain what's going on. So, another question that I wanted to bring up here was just it's kind of kind of back to the basics of blower door testing, and where you see air quality monitoring in kind of in relation to air leakage, if you're if you've seen
Yeah.
anything, experience that.
Yeah, this is a great question. So if you don't know what a blower door is, it's a big fan that gets hooked up to your door and it pressurizes your home and it could evaluate the amount of air leakage that occurs at said pressure. It's kind of the gold standard test for identifying infiltration. And in our homes, especially in cold climates, infiltration is a huge contributor to heat load, and how big your heating system needs to be. As things tighten up, you're getting less and less makeup air from outside through means of infiltration, and eventually you'll get to a point where you're not getting enough, right? Uh, I don't know what the scientific threshold is there. People I've seen said if you're
Yeah.
at or below 3 ACH 50, so 3 air changes per hour at 50 pascal pressure,
Yeah.
might be a good time to start looking at some mechanical ventilation. I could
Yeah.
say from our experience, we started our home we're in right now was in the 5 to 6 ACH range,
Yeah.
and we saw elevated pollutants overnight in our bedroom while we were sleeping with the door closed, or while cooking, or off gassing from products uh,
Yeah.
at the 5 or 6 range that had us think, hey, I think we know we're not at 3, but we want to do something here. And
Yeah.
that's when we got the ERV, and now we're at 2.9 ACH after some more
Yeah.
tightening, and our CO2 can maintain, if we run it full time at full
Yeah.
capacity, 400 or 500 parts per million. If we're
Yeah.
trying to kind of optimize things between energy and air quality and air exchange, it could easily maintain 600, 700. The tighter your house is, the less air exchange you're going to get for free with the outdoors, and the more the pollutants are going to kind of build up and be a problem.
Yeah. Well, and I would argue, now that we have these air quality monitors, I think it really changes the conversation about air tightness. Because I think that on one end, when you have a super leaky home, you have a certain set of problems. And then when you have a super tight home, you have a different set of problems, right? That you have to deal with. And there's still a misnomer going around that homes can be too tight, but I would argue they can't be. I think we have to drive every home down to the passive house level, which means, I think they look at like zero point 0.6 air changes per hour was the old standard, but now there's another metric, like super tight, right? Like almost like, and we're going to have someone on in December talking about building homes like spaceships where you don't want any air exchanging, zero. Now you could, present yourself with a whole set of other issues. I've been in passive house homes before the ventilation systems had been installed, and I felt like I was dying. I couldn't breathe. It was awful. But again, that's before the ventilation systems were installed and working and functioning. And so I think these air quality monitors, if you're like, is my home too tight? Is it not tight? What do I need? They won't lie to you, right? They'll give you the information you need to make that informed decision on what needs to be fixed and ventilate. Now, you can't use it in the new construction. Right, right. So that's in new construction. I think you just have to build it tight and then put these monitors in, and then sort of address it from there would be I suppose my argument. Um, Scott, what we talked a lot about indoor, of course, outdoor and the interplay between the two. Can you just talk like what are you seeing for outdoor monitors and kind of drill into that a little bit?
Yeah, outdoor air quality monitoring has been super interesting to me. If you have an ERV or any sort of fresh air device that has a filter in it, and when you go to change your filter and you see how gross that thing is, it starts to make you think, what's outdoors that is so bad for us? And it also starts to contradict the theory that our indoor air is worse for us than the
Mhm.
outdoor air is, but I don't know if that's always true. So that's why I wanted to investigate our outdoor air quality. And right around that time, the airnow.gov platform really took off, and they have an open API and you can look at, and they have an app and all that good stuff. But I think I touched on this a little bit earlier. I was curious about the hyper local differences because I have neighbors that grow a lot, and I have neighbors that have fireplaces and all that stuff. And I have neighbors that have laundry exhausts that point towards our house or outdoor areas. In those things don't really get flagged on a regional or city level air quality monitor. And you, because of that, you can't make informed decisions about what you as an individual is going to do in your own backyard, uh, unless you have that data. So is it, 100% necessary to monitor the outdoor air quality? Maybe not, because you can leverage those governmental sensors and get a broader picture, unlike you can in your home because you don't have any information. But if you have respiratory sensitivities, certain things trigger you, breathing, asthma, whatever it is, then I highly encourage to get an outdoor monitor and take a look at that information. And what's super cool in Home Assistant is you can, of course, have that integrated in, and then you could use the outdoor data to tell your systems when to or to not do something. So if the outdoor PM2 is above a certain threshold, I might tell my ERVs to stop running because I don't want to bring that high particulate matter air into our home. I rather just kind of close things down, suffer from the higher CO2 levels, but get our like indoor HEPA filters going and good stuff like that.
Yeah. Scott, I guess I forgot to ask, do you have some time to stick around for more questions or do you need to get going?
I could do another 5 or 10 minutes, I think. Happy
Okay.
to. This is the conversation has been awesome. So let's go a little bit
Yeah.
longer.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Thanks. Well, no, so yeah, and I guess to press a little bit more on that outdoor, I mean, do you find that you need to sort of make a decision where there could be trade-offs, and can you automate that where you maybe have to make a decision between, less CO2 in your house versus more PM 2.5 or less humidity in your house? It always seems to be a trade-off with CO2, at least from my perspective, right? It's like if you suppress that CO2 by increasing ventilation, you might bring in other things. So do you ever have to experience that trade-off or how do you automate it? Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a couple important things to say before we get into that. Like
Yeah.
everyone's different, right? And they're going to react differently to different things. And
Right.
also, I'm not a certified expert in this stuff. This is just my lived experience and kind of personal research and reactions to some of this stuff. But a lot of people talk about how CO2 on its own isn't harmful unless you're in the tens of thousands of ppm, and they reference, the submarine and the spaceship and all those environments where there are incredibly high levels of CO2 due to the conditions, but the air is still like super clean and these humans, superhumans, I don't know however you want to call them, but they're able to perform in those conditions. So, I mean, that's one thing to think about and but what typically might get discussed is, well, CO2 is going to be an indicator of your ventilation effectiveness and how much air change you're getting. So if the CO2 levels are high, it might suggest that other indoor pollutants are also high. And it could be those other pollutants that might be the thing that trigger you to feel like crap or feel poorly, whether it's VOCs or particulates or other stuff that maybe isn't being detected and is lingering in the background, like gases and variety of different things, mold, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, the only time we've had to make the decision, we're in the Midwest and we got hit hard during the Canadian wildfires. It
Yeah.
was those times. And once the outdoor levels passed a certain threshold, well, actually, the way we went about it is we continued to ventilate until our indoor sensors went above a threshold that we were uncomfortable with. And then we decided to close things down and rely on our plug-in HEPA filters to do the
Yeah.
best it can beyond that.
Yeah, and I had the same experience. I saw my PM 2.5 levels going. That's when my range hood kicked on, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, what are you doing on here? Oh, it's wildfire smoke's blowing over. So, we turned the ERV off and recirculated the MERV 16 filter, which cleaned it quickly. But do you know, can that stuff kind of be automated to where it's like, hey, this is going on outside. We should turn this thing off. So you don't have to make that decision.
Yeah. So if I had the luxury of the range that turns on due to PM 2 point detection, if I built that out, because I can't do that yet, but I'm
Right.
going to figure out how.
Yeah.
But if we did have it, I would make sure once it's integrated in the Home Assistant to have a conditional check on the
Mhm.
outdoor PM levels, because if the outdoor levels are causing your indoor sensor to throw that for your hood, and your hood turns on, and now you're sucking in like 3 to 500 CFM of makeup air from outside. Probably you're
Right.
bringing in more bad stuff
Right.
unintentionally. So I do think while it's a great idea, the way it's kind of executed in its current situation isn't as good as it could be, and there does need to be those outdoor checks implemented, but it's hard to do that unless you're like working within this open source platform.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what would you think the investment would be for a system? And obviously do you have one monitor? Are the monitors interconnected with other smart demand controls? Are the monitors, do you have multiple monitors? And obviously, are you programming it or are you paying someone else? So I think that's a kind of a loaded question, but maybe you can just speak
Totally.
to what you think about, the investment question.
Yeah, I think so. I'll talk kind of bare minimums,
Right.
assuming you might be able to cobble this stuff together. You could build out the Home Assistant platform from anywhere from like 70 to $80 on a Raspberry Pi little kind of control board thing
Hmm.
to several $100s on a mini PC or one of their pre-made packages. So a couple
Yeah,
$100 to get Home Assistant going. And then Home Assistant doesn't cost any money to run other than the power for it and internet
sure.
connection. And then it's up to you how many air quality monitor sensors and stuff you want to layer in. You can just start with, a handful of temperature and humidity sensors for 30, 40, $50. You could go with something like a Air Things View Plus at I think it's like $200 to $300 now. I think 200 to 300 is probably about average for a good
Mhm.
residential grade air quality monitor.
Yeah, and that's the one that actually gives you a visual, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I forget about that one. So thanks for reminding. I kept saying Airthings doesn't give you any visuals, but they have one that does. So yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
And then, smart thermostats, you might have that already for other reasons, but if you don't, you're looking at a couple $100.
yeah.
Is so, to get off the ground, five,
Mm.
$600 to $800. I mean, things start to add up pretty quickly depending on how deep you want to go and how much granularity you want in your
Sure.
monitoring. And then if you're looking into, new system applications like an ERV, that could cost you $1,000 plus installation, which could be several more $1,000, really depending
Right.
on how you want to get things set up. Same with the dehumidifier. So the more active solutions are going to be in the thousands. And I think you can build a really good, helpful home assistant system for $500 maybe, which
Yeah.
is a lot. I mean, I'm talking like this isn't a lot of money. $500 is definitely a lot to do this. This isn't a great accessible solution, which I think is
Yeah.
also a problem in what they're trying to solve with it being open source.
Yeah. A final question came in here as to whether you've ever written out any kind of how-to guideline and shared that before.
The only how-to I have right now is the article I wrote, which just kind of talks about my experience in getting started, but it doesn't necessarily teach you how to set up and get things going. It was something that I wanted to do. It just kind of got put in the back burner. But
Yeah.
there are a lot of great, if you are wanting to do Home Assistant, there are a lot of great YouTube videos and
Yeah.
other good ways to get into that. I'm happy to share resources or answer questions, and I'll put the article in the chat now, and I'll also put my email in the chat, and you can email me to discuss any of this. I love
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
And if you're on LinkedIn, or maybe what other various socials, certainly I enjoy following you for many years, seeing all your updates and
Thanks.
and and, and interacting. And so make sure to plug in with Scott. I dropped your direct LinkedIn profile in the chat too. So
Thanks,
uh,
Brett.
make sure to get connected. But other than that, yeah, we are at our time, Scott. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this. I think just from
Likewise.
a passionate voluntary, doing it because it's the right thing to do and exciting. So it's great to see that. And hopefully maybe if you've got some other successes, we can have you back on in the future and talk through them. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Email in the chat if you had a burning question that we didn't get to, feel free to shoot my way. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone. Have a
All
great
right.
day.
Take care all. Bye.
Bye.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.